A lot of different types of raster GIS layers out there. This is one, the digital elevation model, where each grid cell represents a different elevation. And this is often used in both display, such as hill shading, and analysis, such as finding out where the steepest areas of the terrain are. This is a color aerial photograph, and we can display either color aerial photographs or black and white aerial photographs in the GIS, and we'll talk about how we display those. This is a map where we've taken something like a color aerial photograph and we've just broken everything down into different categories. This might be a park here, this might be a wetland, this might be an urban area, and then we've assigned each of those a different color. And this covers the entire area. This entire area of the map would have one of these categories associated with each pixel. But sometimes we just associate a category with individual pixels and no value of all the white pixels that are shown here. And this would be an example here where we're looking at primary, secondary, and primitive roads. And if any of those roads exist, we give it one of those three colors. And if there are no roads there, they're assigned to white. Other times we just basically take a scan or a digital photo of a map and use that as a base map. This would be an example of a USGS topo sheet that is properly located, properly georeferenced, so that we can overlay on top of this any other information we would want to, such as where fires are occurring. And given that same idea, we also have these ArcGIS online base map tiles. And these different tiles are ones that show kind of a base map as we would expect to see a base map, with things like roads and streets and parks and other things that we would expect on a base map. And we'll talk about how we tile things and what tiling means in just a minute here. So we can kind of break this into two general categories. One would be continuous raster, and continuous raster stores numeric values that can be measured anywhere. So some examples of that would be elevation. No matter where you are, you're going to be at a certain elevation or another elevation. The same thing with temperature or humidity or precipitation. All of those things we can either measure or estimate a value, and there has to be some value of that at every particular point. And imagery is another example of this continuous raster. If we take a photograph from the air of a place, every pixel in that image is going to have some value of color because there's something there. So in these typical examples, we store the brightness value. Sometimes that's called a digital number, or DN. And typically that digital number has a value of between 0 and 255 for its red, green, and blue components. The other example is discrete rasters. So these are stored in categories. So once again, this could be land use with wetlands, forested areas, and urban. Each one of those might get a number, but each one of those would be a separate category. And so this is considered discrete because there's already discrete categories within which the values fall. In this example here, right, there's three different types of roads. Each one of those roads is represented by a different color here, and those would be the three categories, with a no data category also being in there. So remember, this sort of looks like vector data, but it's different than vector data in that each one of these pixels is only going to have one value associated with it to indicate what kind of road is there. So for these raster tiles, these are some of these, such as this one here, were based on vector data. So this was put together as vector data, but then once again, it's easy to think that it was either scanned or a photograph was taken of it, so that it could be used as a base map to put other things on top of, such as trails or other things. Sometimes this is called a digital raster graphic file, or a DRG file, and these can be tiled. So basically they cover an entire area. We might be combining USGS topo sheets that are next to each other in order to create a map that we could cover the entire United States with this if we wanted to. With ArcGIS Online and other applications such as Google Maps and all sorts of Apple Maps, all sorts of other applications, they have developed these complex vector layers. They started out as vector layers, but then they've been converted into raster so that they can be quickly displayed and used as a base map. And this is good because we can pretty much have everything on a map that we want already as a base map, and then we can add our own information here, maybe where people's houses are or where fire hydrants are, or whatever sort of information we wanted to add on top of this base map. These are tiled because they display at different scales. So as we zoom in and out, the data there is going to display at different scales, and we're not going to get all of the detail on one scale that we get on the other. So this gets to this idea of raster resolution. If we zoom in far enough on something at 90-meter resolution, we can see that this basically just looks like a bunch of little squares that are all pieced together. But if we go down to 10-meter resolution, this really does start to look like roads. So the X and Y dimension of each pixel defines a resolution. So you can imagine in one 90-meter pixel, we would have 9 times 9 or 81 of these 10-meter pixels associated with it. So it's 81 times kind of more detailed when we look at it, when we look at something like this. So that's kind of the advantage of going to 10-meter resolution. The disadvantage is our data set here is 81 times as large as it used to be. So we really have to think about whether that's worth it, getting that extra resolution by increasing the size of our data by so much. And when we want to serve these, what we have to think about is how can we quickly show things that look appropriate at the scale, and then how can that effectively be used as a base map? So what we do is we have multiple layers with different resolutions. And each of these is only shown at the appropriate scale. So as we zoom in and out of Google Maps, what we basically see is a bunch of tiled maps that are appropriate to the scale at which we're looking at it on our screen. So as we zoom out on this, we might lose resolution. These smaller streets may no longer be labeled, but I-25 will still be labeled here. Some of the smaller parks may disappear, just like you see when you zoom in and out of Google Maps. This is the same way that the ArcGIS online base maps work. They're raster, so we can't change them. We can't move the streets around or anything. It's just an image, like someone took a photograph of a base map. They're tiled so that as we zoom in and out, we get these different sorts of resolutions. So sometimes when you're displaying raster data, it will ask you if you want to build pyramids. And what building pyramids means is we start with the most detailed data, and just for display purposes, we combine in each subsequent layer of our pyramids, we combine a 4x4 area in some manner, such as you can see here, there's 3 greens and 1 yellow, so green wins here, so it gets assigned to green here. But then in the next level, there's 2 reds, 1 yellow, and 1 green, so that entire thing gets assigned to red. But this would be appropriate for displaying at 1 to 12,500, this one as we zoom out, and this one as we zoom out further to 1 to 50,000. So we're basically displaying our data on the screen faster by using these pyramids, but it does take a minute to build it. That's okay. I would highly recommend always building pyramids if you're asked to build pyramids, but also be aware that this is going to increase the size of your entire data set by about 50%. So if this was a 2 megabyte raster that you started with, once you build pyramids, it will be saved as a 3 megabyte raster because it saved these subsequent layers for rapid display.